Good evening, everyone. Let me first say hello to our students, our parents, educators, and staff in, of course, the most beautiful 13th congressional district, the congressional district in the country. And I'd like to also call it, as I say all the time, it's the most enlightened congressional district in the country. And I want to thank our esteemed panelists who really continue to make sure that our community and our children are well served, well educated. Our state superintendent of public education, who also is my constituent, Tony Thurmond, and of course our Alameda County superintendent, Karen Monroe. I want to thank you all for joining us this evening, and it's really because of you two that I think our children can have hope that their needs, regardless of circumstances, that their educational needs are going to be addressed in our county and in our state. So I just want to thank you so much, because I know right now reopening our schools is vital for our nation's children and is critical to our economic recovery. And here in Alameda County, unfortunately, we're still in the middle of a terrible public health crisis. And so it's so important that our students and teachers are able to return to school safely. So as you know, we've been in Washington, D.C. fighting to provide schools and local governments with the resources and the funding that they need to safely return to school in person for in-person instruction. And let me just mention the relief bill that we passed. It allocated $15 billion to California alone for relief for K through 12 schools. Of course, we say build back better, but also build back bolder. So we hope that this investment of federal dollars in the state of California, and of course in my district and in Alameda County, have helped us through these very, very difficult times. So I'm not going to take long with any more comments, because I really want our educators to talk, especially given all of the dilemmas, really, quite frankly, that we're facing now. So I will just begin to talk and ask our panelists to answer a few questions and engage in a discussion, because I tell you, as adults, what we're seeing with the COVID pandemic now, the Delta unfortunate virus that's the variant that's really taken over in some places, I worry about our children, our teachers, our workers, our employees in the school system. But here in California, I'm confident that we are doing the right thing. But I want you to kind of break it down to us in terms of what the type of, what safety protocols will schools be putting into place to stop the spread of COVID-19, both statewide here and in Alameda County. Superintendent Monroe, you want to start out?
I'd be happy to. And, you know, fun fact, I'm also your constituent, so could not be prouder to be a Barbara Lee constituent. So yes, all day, every day, this is what county offices and districts are focusing on, how to bring students back safely. Many districts have already done that. School is underway in several of our districts, and with others starting in a matter of days. All of the same mitigation measures that you saw when school opened in the spring have been implemented, and others. Things like mobile water stations to fill water bottles, mobile hand washing stations, hand sanitizing. Often many schools have barriers. There's masking for all, as we know right now, even before this, but certainly in Alameda County with the new health order. So all that's going on. The game changer, however, is for students and staff 12 years old and above. There's the vaccine. And we are encouraging in every possible way folks to get vaccinated. We're hoping that our younger students will be able to be vaccinated soon. We're definitely keeping our finger on the pulse of that news because that's going to further protect and solidify that we get the most students back in front of their teachers, which we know is the best place for them to be. So I'll just stop there by way of introduction. I am certainly happy to give details about what the generous funding from the federal government and the state is being allocated for, and what specific measures schools are looking at putting in place. So.
Good. Superintendent Thurmond.
Thank you, Congresswoman Lee. It's an honor to have you representing us in Washington, D.C. It's an honor to work with you, Superintendent Monroe. And yeah, it's a tough time and a scary time when you see what's happening with the variant, but we know that our kids will benefit from in-person instruction. And if we follow the COVID mitigation strategies that have been laid out for us, our kids can be safe and they can continue to learn. It was great, by the way, today to be at Horace Mann Elementary School, to see the smiling faces of our students and the staff who were there. Big shout out to Principal Adams, who is an incredible leader there and has been in this district and Oakland Unified for some 2 decades and is an incredible leader. They're showing us the way. They're showing us how this can be done. And they're putting into good resource all of the funds provided by the CARES Act and by the American Rescue Plan. Thank you, Congresswoman Lee. I know that the conditions couldn't be tougher in DC, but these resources, plus what the state is making possible, does provide a way for this to get done. And as Superintendent Monroe said, nothing more important than those who can getting a vaccine. I'll just mention that on Wednesday, we're holding another town hall on vaccine outreach. We call it, statewide focus. We're telling people it's not too late. Get a vaccine now, and it can truly make the difference for our students being able to come back and to be in school. Masking is the way. We can't always accommodate 3 feet of social distancing, but wearing a mask is proven statistically research-based way to keep everyone safe. And of course, COVID testing. And in this state, we've worked closely to secure 5 million rapid COVID tests so that you can have awareness in 15 minutes if someone is positive for COVID. And then now we're talking about how do we support learning recovery. And I'm just excited to say that this state has provided resources for universal TK for every 4-year-old to be able to have a preschool experience, and universal meals. As you all know, we served 500 million meals from our schools during the pandemic. And now we have a universal meals program. That means every student, regardless of their income, no paperwork. If they want a meal, they get a meal. That's breakfast and lunch. And so, yes, we have big challenges ahead of us, but I think we have big opportunities ahead of us to build back an education system that will serve all of our students better. Excited to have started my day in Oakland and to be wrapping up my day with great leaders from the city of Oakland.
Thank you, Superintendent Thurmond. Before I go back to Superintendent Monroe, let me just ask you about masks in classrooms in terms of the requirements for personnel, for teachers, for staff, for children. Is there a requirement or not? And how do we address that if there's some resistance? And then secondly, I just want to thank you, Superintendent Thurmond and Superintendent Monroe, for not missing a beat during this pandemic, because I know yourself as a social worker understand all of the comprehensive needs of children. And the schools I visited, it was just quite amazing. Even at some schools, schools were passing out diapers. And, I've been a big diaper person, trying to make sure everyone has access to diapers. And that's part of just who we are when you have low-income families who don't have the resources toward the end of the month to purchase diapers. I saw schools distributing diapers, and there were long lines for the diapers. So thank you all so much for that. But on the mask requirement, how are you, I don't even like to say enforcing it. How are we ensuring that that message is clear, that it provides for safety, for the safety of our children and teachers?
Glad to speak to it, and glad to be on the call with you, who is in the California Hall of Fame for social workers. And Superintendent Monroe, I think, has led as a great example about the importance of addressing the well-being and social emotional learning of our students. She's been talking about that even before schools began to reopen. And so it's an honor to be here with both of you. Simply put, every Californian is expected to wear a mask at school, students and staff. And it is the thing that will help to keep us safe especially until we can get more vaccines. By the way, Congresswoman, I should say that it is expected that everyone's wearing a mask regardless of vaccine status. I think sometimes people think, hey, I got my vaccine, I don't have to wear a mask. But Congresswoman, they do have to wear a mask. Each district makes its own rules about enforcement. But like you said, it's not about the enforcement. If someone shows up without a mask, the school will provide it. We want everyone to have a mask. And our students have shown that they can tolerate wearing masks. Our students have gotten used to it. They know. They ask for a little break. They say, I need a little break. They go outside to get some fresh air, and they continue to do what they need to do. And so by order of the California Department of Public Health, every student and every adult in every school is required to wear a mask indoors. And when they're outdoors for recess or other activities, they can have their mask off. And so I know that not everyone feels, some people may not like it, but it is proven that it can keep us safe. And it is what everyone in the state of California will be doing in our schools.
So children are setting the example. Maybe adults will follow, and the children shall lead. Superintendent,
the children shall lead.
Absolutely.
Federal funding. Why don't you tell us what, because, I knew when we worked on the federal funding that the investments that we sent into Alameda County were going to be used appropriately and wisely for our children. Kind of tell us a little bit about what happened here in Alameda County that was necessary in terms of the pandemic with federal funds, and what we need to do. We need to do more. I'm always going to fight as an appropriator for more. So what's left on the table that we need to look at?
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for the funds, the resources, and really for your deep understanding of what this means to schools and kids in California, and more specifically in Alameda County. So these funds have been used for a myriad of things. One of the things that Alameda County Office of Education was able to do during the pandemic, which is not something I would recommend going forward, but was to stand up a new department, social emotional learning department. And what we are doing is convening groups of districts together to really look at what those needs are in the midst of this pandemic for their students. A lot of this will not be realized until all of our students are back for some time, what the depth of these needs are. But that is also a compliant use of this funding, which a lot of districts are very grateful for. Because as you well know, and both you and Superintendent Thurmond, having a background in social work, understand that having a decrease, as we've seen in the reporting of child protective services reporting, child abuse cases in some instances by up to 50%, is really a bellwether for how some of our students and families have struggled during this pandemic to care for their children. So that's one use. There are also many physical needs that are being met to mitigate for the spread of this virus. New upgraded ventilation systems, which many school districts could not even fathom being able to afford or do prior to receiving this funding. All sorts of, you heard me talk just a little bit about things like mobile hand washing stations. And when you go into schools, you'll see things like, hand sanitizing dispensers. And as you mentioned, Congresswoman, masks, no student or staff should be without access to the protective equipment that it needs. So that's a lot of what is being spent on. For some of our school districts who are, Superintendent Thurmond spoke to this, who are looking to implement some policies and procedures that are particularly challenging. Masks are not. Masks are just ubiquitous now. Yes, they have a downside, but it seems as though the kids forget they have them on when you watch them going throughout their day. But the questions of, okay, if kids are clustered outside, should they wear masks in those settings? And what would that be like? And how do you decide? And all of that. So being able to have additional supervision and a lot of those extra things that are needed to make sure students and staff are safe, things that we wouldn't have otherwise needed or thought of, and some things that will be good for our schools going forward.
Thank you. And let me just ask you, and I want to ask Superintendent Thurmond this question also about distance learning and remote learning. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, access to broadband. We know there is a digital divide, even in my community where we have enormous wealth and one of the highest poverty rates in the country for children, child poverty. So how has distance learning affected children? Have we gotten to the point where everyone has access to broadband? And then finally, I have to share this story about my two grandchildren, right? They're in Illinois. One of them was so anxious to get back into school. She makes straight A's, top of every test in Illinois and the world. The other one, she's, B's, C+ and B's. During the distance learning and the remote classes, my granddaughter, and we were worried about what would take place in terms of their education. Would they drop in their test scores? Would they be distracted and what have you? One granddaughter, the one that does really well, straight A's, she was a little antsy to get back into school. The one who was probably C+ to B, Simone, she, as a result of remote learning, made it to straight A's and A+. And that's because she was totally focused on her school, no boys, right? Totally focused on learning. And so I saw her grades go up and she really excelled. And so now I'm worried about her going back into the classroom. So what is the experience that you all are experiencing here around distance learning and remote learning, both in Alameda County and statewide?
Yeah, so one of the roles I serve, and then I'll turn it over to Superintendent Thurmond, who's been working really hard on closing this digital divide. But one of the roles I serve this year is president of the 58 county superintendents. And what that's done is really opened my eyes to how diverse California is in terms of needs of students, but also access to things like broadband. Something that we noticed, and it won't be a surprise to you because Congresswoman, you just laid that out, is that we have been able to look at the learning needs of students through this. We've had to be creative in many ways, and some students have flourished. Many more have not flourished under distance learning or virtual learning. However, what we want to make sure of is, as we go back, that the things that we have learned, the options that we've provided students don't just go away. So we knew that what we call in education blended learning or flipped classrooms was a really good strategy for students. So maybe a student would be able to listen to a lecture, watch a video of their teacher giving a lecture, and they could watch it in their own time and respond to questions online, speak to their peers about the content, message their teacher, and then go into class and really have a rich hands-on learning experience. For a lot of schools, the impediment to that was getting the teachers the training they needed to be online and to have the one-to-one devices that they needed for students to access that. Well, that has happened. It was necessitated through this pandemic. And so what we want to make sure of is that, as you talked about your granddaughter, who's thriving in many ways in this learning setting, to be able to say, okay, we want to be able to provide options. We agree that being in person with a teacher, there really isn't a substitute for that. However, we want to make sure that we're augmenting that with some of the things that technology can provide. And, as you said, not every student is created the same. And it really has allowed us to look at who has thrived, who has not thrived, and why in many cases.
Great.
So,
Superintendent Thurmond, what are you seeing statewide?
Yeah, I think Superintendent Monroe laid out so many of the key things that have happened. I think when the pandemic began, it uncovered this really embarrassing fact that we have allowed a digital divide to exist, not just in the 13th or in the state, but in the nation. And for all the wealth and riches that we have, our kids should have access to the top technology, but yet 1 million students didn't have a computer. So naturally, as you might expect, many of our students struggled during the pandemic. They didn't have the basic tools to stay connected to their educators. And that's why we see many of the gaps that have in learning have been exacerbated. But some students actually did flourish. Some students who previously experienced bullying did better in remote learning. Some students who felt like they experienced the kind of microaggressions of the impacts of racism felt that they were in a more supportive environment when they were in independent learning and so distance learning. And so now we find ourselves, we fast forward ourselves where we say, yes, that we think that the default for most students should be in-person instruction so they can connect with peers and teachers. We recognize that we cannot just move away from what we've learned from remote learning, and that when students have the tools and teachers have the training and there's live instruction, that students can do well, like your niece did, that they can do well and so now we have new law in the state that creates some additional what we're calling independent study options, which is remote learning, but it has a lot of guardrails to keep students safe from the things that didn't work well the first time. There's a requirement. You have to make sure that students have a computer and access to the internet. There has to be live instruction, essentially saying that the quality of what students get needs to be high level as if they were in the classroom. And if things aren't going well, there's nice check-in periods so that you can then say, okay, we should move this student back to in-person instruction. And so I think we have the chance to have the best of both worlds. And now because of the support from you on the federal level and the state, there are billions of dollars to promote more broadband in this state, even in the parts of the state that don't have the infrastructure to have broadband. And so we're going to keep working until we close the digital divide once and for all of our students.
Right. And, you know, as we negotiate this new infrastructure bill, we have investments in broadband. And so I wanted to know, God, we don't have too much time left. In closing, is Alameda, are all of our children now in Alameda County, do all of our children have access to broadband and to technology, or do we still have some gaps in the Alameda County and then throughout the state? And then in your response, why don't you give us some optimistic closing remarks in spite of all of the challenges? Because I'm always hopeful when I talk to you both about our children and what we're doing here in Alameda County and in the state, because we are definitely leading the way on so many fronts. And I just want to thank you guys both. So Superintendent Monroe.
Absolutely. So I won't say we don't have any gaps. We are working very hard and have worked very hard to mitigate those gaps. I know that Oakland in particular has worked really closely with a lot of partners, industry partners with the city of Oakland, to make sure that every student has not only a device, but a hotspot if needed and connection, broadband connection. Some of our other districts, they're, you know, aside from a small group of students, most of them, the vast majority of them have connection for their students. And if they don't, they're looking to mitigate for that in real time. So it is rare at this point in this, I could not have said this at the beginning of the pandemic. It is rare that students do not have the connectivity. I have to mention just one more time that yes, it is broadband, but a lot of times the barriers to getting connected are not technology. You know, they're family circumstances. They're having, you know, a quiet place to work. Are seeing some of our high school students needing to work to support their families. So while they have the hardware they need, they don't always have the life circumstances they need to be focusing on school, which is one of the reasons why we want to make sure we get them back with us as safely and as quickly as possible. So at the Alameda County Office of Education, our information technology professionals are working with IT professionals in all of the 18 school districts to make sure we stay on top of this. And one of the things that Superintendent Thurmond's office has done is really aggregate this information across the state. So county offices have at different times reported how successful we're being at making sure our students have access to this. And, you know, just the support is very much appreciated and very much needed. So thank you, Congresswoman, for the ways in which you've led and really, opened doors for us to make sure we're serving our students the very best we can.
Great. I'm very proud of Alameda County and what has taken place. And again, you've listed some silver linings in the midst of all these challenges. Mm-hmm. And so hopefully we'll get through this once again, but as we muddle through this and keep our children safe and healthy, parents, teachers, support staff, all of those at schools, we'll look at how to build back better and bolder. And I think that's what you're doing here in Alameda County. So thank you so much. Superintendent Thurmond.
I'm just honored that I get to serve with two incredible leaders here who provide leadership that is bar none the best that we might find anywhere. And both of you, thank you. I think you all touched on it. I don't think we'll ever experience something more difficult than the pandemic. But as we come out of these ashes, we have an opportunity to really build a system that is better for all of our students. And we have to acknowledge that the education systems in this country have not always been good enough for all of our students, especially our students of color and our low-income students. And the pandemic has forced us to come to grips with some of those disparities. And now we find ourselves with more resources than ever for education. This is a moment, and we have to seize this moment to build it better. And we have to have conversations about student safety, about learning. I think that we're going to lead with things like literacy to support our students. We can't replace lost seat time, but we can make sure that our students learn to read by third grade. And we do strong intervention programs for our older students, like the ones that I've seen Superintendent Monroe support with the Freedom School. And I know that you know about Freedom School, Congresswoman Lee. This is our moment. And shout out to Oakland Unified on the technology issue, that they're at a point where 98% of the students have access to the devices that they need. The state budget has more money for broadband and for the digital literacy that Superintendent Monroe was talking about it. So as we come from this moment, we're talking, the state is prepared to create an ethnic studies graduation requirement for our students so they can learn about the contributions of their ancestors, people of color who've helped to build this great state. And that is important for us in this moment where we've seen so many racial injustices, that we can talk about race in a way that we address bias, how it has impacted our classroom, and close achievement gaps and reduce suspensions. Tough times ahead, but big opportunities. I'm grateful for the leadership of Superintendent Monroe, and for you, Congresswoman Lee. Thank you for always stewarding the incredible work that needs to be happening, not just here, but in our nation. It's an honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you. Thank you, Superintendent Thurmond. I'm glad you raised the ethnic studies issue because, as I said, we're moving forward in this state. Our county's moving forward. My congressional district is, while there are many who are trying to institute bans on critical race theory, trying to deny children the ability to understand the historical context for much of what we're dealing with today. And the only way to move forward, and there's a term in the Ghanaian language of the Akan people, Sankofa. It's a bird, a mythical bird that's looking backwards with an egg in her mouth, looking at, and the saying goes that the Sankofa moment means that if you can't move forward unless you learn from your past. You have to know your history. You have to know what lessons were learned, what to do right, what to do wrong, what took place. And only then can you move forward to create a better world. And I think that's what you guys are doing with the curriculum here in California. So I'm very proud of that because we need this while the rest of the country is moving backwards, unfortunately. So thank you guys again. I hope those of you who joined us this evening really recognize and honor your educators in the state of California and in the county and in my congressional district, because they care about children. They care about our young people. That's their priority. That's my priority, because it's our young people who are securing the future. And certainly you both are doing that. So thank you all again very much. I want to thank our staffs for putting this together, and good luck, and hope to see you soon on the other side of this pandemic.
Agreed. Thank you, Congresswoman.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Stay masked, everybody. Stay masked.
Stay masked. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for the teachable moment there about the
That's
Ghanaian.
right.
That was great. Barbara Lee teaching up in here.